The 1953 Top Set, and the stories behind the men. In this series, I unpack stories of the men on the cards of the 1953 Topps baseball set. Most cards in the set are called commons by the hobby, but the men on the cards are anything but common. Cards 31 through 35. Ewell Blackwell, card number 31. Ewell Blackwell was born on October 23, 1922 in Fresno, California, and quickly became a tall, lanky boy, eventually reaching 6 foot 6 inches. Blackwell enjoyed basketball the most, but his high school baseball coach noticed he could throw hard and moved him to pitcher. After high school in 1941, while working at the Vultee aircraft plant, scouts began to notice Blackwell for his performance on the company team. His father demanded an invite to a big league spring training camp over a big signing bonus, so the only taker was the Reds. They gave him a $750 bonus and an additional $250 if he stayed until mid-season. So in 1942, Blackwell reported to the Cincinnati Reds training camp, where future Hall of Famer Bill McKinney told reporters that the gangly 19-year-old would be one of the greatest of all time. Young Ewell made the Reds' 1942 opening day roster, but only appeared in 2 games before being sent down to Syracuse, where he was a star before ending his season with the pneumonia and missing the Junior World Series. Blackwell, nicknamed the Whip, was a feared pitcher in the 1940s. Legends like Joe DiMaggio and Ted Williams, Jackie Robinson, Roy Campanella bemoaned having to face him. Stan Musial said, "I don't see how Blackwell ever lost a game." Unfortunately, Blackwell's career was shortened to poor health and chronic shoulder pain, but his career was a mix of phenomenal accomplishments and forgettable games. As with so many young men, Blackwell was drafted into the Army in January of 1943. Even though he had experience with aircraft manufacturing, the Army made him a cook. Luckily, Mess Sergeant Blackwell only had a short stint in Europe at the very end of the war in Patton's Third Army. Blackwell's 71st Infantry Division arrived in Germany in January of 1945. The war was almost over, but deadly combat continued. "I never got shot at, but I got scared plenty when those 88s, German artillery shells, started going off over my head," he remembered. He was with General George S. Patton's Third Army when it linked up with the Soviet Red Army in Austria. After Germany surrendered in May, Mess Sergeant Blackwell served his unit a banquet topped off with apple pies. He downed one of the pies all by himself. After the fighting ended, he pitched for the Army Division baseball team, and in September 1945, he won the first game of the European Championship Series in front of more than 50,000 soldiers at the huge Nuremberg Stadium, where Adolf Hitler had harangued the Nazi faithful. Right before Blackwell left Germany to return to civilian life, he pitched a no-hitter, but was 3 weeks late for the 1946 Red Spring training camp. Sports writer Joe Falls described Blackwell as, for one season, 1947, the most intimidating pitcher of all time. Blackwell never dwelled on his injuries and looked back on the great time he had as a major league pitcher, especially with all the great players he got to play with and against. The tall, lanky, sidearm pitching Blackwell put fear in many of a batter in the later half of the 1940s before poor health and chronic pain ended a promising career. After baseball, Blackwell worked as state manager in South Carolina for a large distiller company. He often played in old-timers games and baseball players' golf tournaments. In 1960, Blackwell was elected to the Reds Hall of Fame. In retirement, he and his wife Dottie moved to the mountains in North Carolina, where he died on October 29, 1996, in Hendersonville, North Carolina, of cancer. Even after being late, his rookie season was everything the Reds organization could hope for. Ewell's powerful fastball and multiple speed curveballs helped him to the 4th best ERA in the National League at 2.45. But due to the worst run support in all of baseball, his win-loss record was a disappointing 9-13. He had to lead the league in shutouts to get 5 of his 9 wins. One of his phenomenal career accomplishments was that he only allowed 1 home run in 194 1/3 innings his rookie season. After the 1946 season, he returned to his wife's hometown to play one of his loves, basketball, but the Reds organization would not allow it and paid him $3,000 in bonus money as compensation for loss of income. Unfortunately, he would not get to play basketball, and soon his marriage would end too. In 1947, Blackwell would set a record with 16 straight wins, of which 5 were shutouts. During the streak, his ERA was a meager 1.43. In the middle of the streak, Ewell threw a no-hitter against the Boston Braves on June 18th, and after the game, the cocky Blackwell predicted he would throw another no-hitter in the next game. He went 8 1/3 inning of no-hit pitching until Brooklyn's Eddie Stanky hit a hard grounder between Ewell's legs to break up the no-no. Blackwell showcased his unhittable prowess in the 1947 All-Star Game by striking out the leadoff hitter, then fanning 3 more future Hall of Famers, Ted Williams, Lou Boudreau, and Joe Gordon, in 3 shutout innings. Ewell finished the season with 22 wins and 8 losses, which was almost 1/3 of the Reds' wins for the season. He led the National League in victories, complete games, and strikeouts. Ewell finished second in the league with a 2.47 ERA and second in MVP voting. But a poll of players named him the league's toughest pitcher. Blackwell's unusual, jerky delivery was a nightmare, especially for lefty hitters. Future Hall of Famer Ralph Kiner said, "Your legs shook when you tried to dig in on him." Blackwell's career was coming together as one of the shining stars in all of Major League Baseball. 25 years old, Blackwell pitched on a cool and damp day in the spring of 1948 during an exhibition game in Columbia, South Carolina. He felt a stabbing pain in his shoulder. He battled through the pain until the second month of the season, when the injury worsened to the point that he could not raise his arm above his head. After a short recovery, he pushed through the season, but his ERA doubled from that of the 1947 season. Unfortunately, 1949 started off with a surgery to remove an infected kidney, cutting through important pitching muscles. Blackwell returned to baseball action too early, and he struggled out of the bullpen until the last month of the season, where he started looking like the real, feared pitcher of 2 years earlier. The 1950 and 51 seasons, where he returned to similar form to his 1947 season. His ERA returned to the high 2s and low 3 range, but playing for the struggling Cincinnati Reds, he only had a win-loss record of around 500. After early struggles in the 1952 season, the most forgettable day of Blackwell's career occurred. The May 21st game against the Dodgers became legendary. Blackwell retired the leadoff hitter, then gave up a walk, a home run, double, walk, a single for 4 runs, before Blackwell was pulled after 1/3 of an inning pitched. Frustrated, Ewell showered and returned to the team hotel, where he walked into the bar to see the Dodgers were still batting in the first inning. After a few minutes, Bud Byerly, the reliever that relieved Blackwell, walked into the bar and sat beside Ewell. 19 straight Dodger batters reached base, scoring in a Major League Baseball record of 15 runs in the first inning. When the first inning finished, the Dodgers set 6 modern Major League records. Blackwell struggled the rest of the summer before being traded to the New York Yankees for a Major League pitcher, 3 minor leaguers, and $35,000. The trade outraged many teams on how pickups were made between the 2 different leagues, and it led to a waiver rule that was changed in the offseason. Even after struggling most of the 1952 season, now with the Yankees in the World Series, surprisingly, Blackwell was tapped as the Game 5 starter against the Dodgers that had the record first inning earlier in the season against Blackwell and his Reds pitching staff. Blackwell struggled in the second inning, but had a no decision with the Yankees battling back before the Dodgers won it in the 11th inning. Ewell only pitched about half of the 1953 season due to chronic shoulder pain. The Yankees have invited him back to their 1954 spring training without a contract, but unfortunately, he could no longer pitch. At 31, Blackwell announced his retirement and said, "I have pain all the way up from my elbow to my shoulder." After a few months of rest, Ewell changed his mind and pitched in the Dominican Republic League before shoulder pain gradually returned by the end of the season. He returned to the 1955 Yankee spring training and did well enough to be traded to the newly transplanted Kansas City Athletics. Ewell struggled in April and was released by the end of the month, but joined the Pacific Coast League to finish the year in his last season of professional baseball. The sports writer Red Smith wrote that Blackwell was built like a slouchy fly rod, being composed largely of arms, neck, and ears. Another writer, Joel Williams, thought his delivery looked like a Picasso impression of an octopus in labor. He recalled a train ride home from Pittsburgh after the last game of one season. The Reds' party got so rowdy that the conductor threatened to kick them off. When the players ran out of booze, they picked up more at a stop along the way. By the time they reached Cincinnati, most of them had lost their shirt sleeves. Some had lost their entire shirts, and several had been relieved of their undershorts. We were the drunkest, happiest, noisiest baseball team that ever got off a train. But then all of a sudden you could have heard of pin drop. They saw their wives waiting on the platform. Very quietly, we all shook hands, wished each other a good winter, promised to meet again in the spring, and then went home to face the music. Clyde Vollmer, card number 32. Vollmer was born on September 24, 1921 in Cincinnati, Ohio. As a kid, he played for the Bridgetown Baseball League in Hamilton County and was a leader on the team that won the Hamilton County Grade School Baseball Championship in 1935, according to a publication called News of the Reds, dated May 20, 1947. Vollmer graduated from Western Hills High School in 1938 and signed as a free agent with the Reds the following year. The 17-year-old was signed to a contract worth $75 a month. After 3 full seasons and part of a fourth in the minors, Vollmer made his major league debut with the Reds on May 31, 1942. The 20-year-old started in left field against the Pittsburgh Pirates at Crossley Field and connected for a solo home run in his first Major League Baseball at-bat in the 3rd inning. He became one of only 31 major leaguers through 2023 to hit a home run on the first pitch thrown to him in the major leagues. Vollmer joined the United States Army on October 31, 1942, and served in World War II for 3 years. After his discharge in the fall of 1945, Vollmer returned to the Reds, playing 1 game in 1946 and the remainder of the campaign in AAA. Vollmer joined the Red Sox in 1950 and was a member for roughly 3 years. His most memorable season came in 1951. A streak began on July 6, 1951 and ran through July 28, 1951. During the streak, Vollmer hit 13 home runs, 13 singles, 4 doubles, and 1 triple while compiling a .731 slugging percentage. He hit 2 Grand Slam home runs and drove in 40 runs while scoring 25 to count for 40% of Boston's runs during his crazy hitting streak. That month belonged to Vollmer, as no single month has ever belonged to a major leaguer before or since, said famed sports announcer Curt Gowdy. It was the most amazing hitting streak I ever heard of. No one has ever won as many games with key hits day after day during the 9th inning or later to rescue the Red Sox from sure defeat with the game's most important hit. It was incredible. Vollmer finished his Major League Baseball career in September 1954 as a reserve outfielder and pinch hitter. Vollmer retired from baseball and acquired Lark Lounge, which he owned for 20 years. He later was a member of the American Legion, the Fraternal Order of Eagles, and the Delhi Senior Citizens. Vollmer died on October 2, 2006 at St. Luke Hospital in Florence, Kentucky. Vollmer's old high school, Western Hills, produced other notable players such as Don Zimmer, Russ Nixon, Eddie Brinkman, and a few years later, Pete Rose. During a game at Fenway Park in June of 1950, the Red Sox destroyed the St. Louis Browns 29-4, and outfielder Clyde Vollmer was batting leadoff. That day, he became the only player in history to come to the plate 8 times in 8 innings. During Vollmer's celebrated debut in 1942, it took his father 2.5 innings into the second game to get into the stadium. By chance, the Reds' rookie left fielder had yet to come up for his first at-bat. Just as the public address announcer said, "The Cincinnati batter is Clyde Vollmer, left field," Clyde's father was settling into his seat. Several weeks later, manager McKinney recalled for the press what happened next. He got to bat for the first time in the third inning, related McKinney. Well, before he steps up, he moves over to me and says, "Mr. McKinney, I don't know what the take sign is." And I say to him, "Young man, never mind the take sign, just swing at the first pitch." Well, Max Butcher is the Pittsburgh pitcher, and Vollmer followed instructions perfectly, swung at the first pitch, and knocked it on a line off the top of the laundry roof in left field. So, pictures here on the left, you'll see the three men holding bats. That's Vollmer with Jim Busby and Jackie Jensen. Below that is manager Steve O'Neill. And moving to the right and to the top, you'll see with Vollmer there is Mickey McDermott, who was a pitcher. And then below that, featured earlier in this video, was Ewell Blackwell sitting with Vollmer. Bob Kennedy, card number 33. Robert Daniel Kennedy was born on the south side of Chicago on August 18, 1920. As a youngster, Kennedy was an outstanding pitcher, throwing numerous no-hitters in American Legion Baseball. At only 16 years old, he was signed as a third baseman in 1937 by his hometown Chicago White Sox. The White Sox called Kennedy up in September, and he made his major league debut on September 14, 1939, at the age of 19 as a pinch hitter. In 1940, he became the first teenage major leaguer since 1900 to play in 150 games in a season. Kennedy's 1941 and 1942 seasons were uneventful, playing in 76 and 113 games respectively. In October of 1942, Kennedy was drafted in the Navy. He was trained as a pilot and transferred to the United States Marine Corps. From 1943 to 1945, he served not only as a pilot, but as a flight instructor as well. He trained Ted Williams in Pensacola, Florida, and they both played on the baseball team there. Kennedy would be deployed in combat action throughout the war. He was finally discharged in January of 1946. In 1952, Kennedy would only play in 22 games before the military would recall him during the Korean War, as were Ted Williams, Jerry Coleman, and Lloyd Merriman. Kennedy would return to the Indians in 1953. There were only 4 players to serve in World War II and the Korean War. All of these men were fighter pilots, and Uncle Sam recognized their unique skill set. During the 1962 season, Kennedy was named to the Cubs College of Coaches. The Cubs had experimented with having a committee of coaches run the team on the field since 1961, as opposed to having a single manager. However, after the 1962 season ended with what is still the worst record in franchise history, owner Phil Wrigley named Kennedy as head coach for an indefinite period. After Kennedy led the 1963 Cubs to their first winning record in 17 years, he began to assert a more traditional managerial authority over the team. He served as head coach from 1963 until June 13, 1965, posting a 162 and 198 record. Kennedy would go on to become a special assistant, minor league manager, a coach, a scout, and a front office executive. Sandwiched in between these roles, he would get another shot to manage a big league team. In 1968, the Athletics moved from Kansas City to Oakland, and Kennedy would become their first manager. Oakland finished with an 82-80 record, a notable improvement from the 62 and 99 last place 1967 Athletics. According to the 1972 book Mustache Gang, authored by Ron Bergman, on the last day of the season, Kennedy walked into Charlie Finley's office expecting an extension. 5 minutes later, Kennedy had been fired. Kennedy spent his retirement in Mesa, Arizona, where he had moved his family years earlier. He died in 2005 at the age of 84. Kennedy's the answer to a trivia question. Who was the last man to ever bat for the Brooklyn Dodgers? At 3:36 p.m., Kennedy flew out to center field on a 2-2 pitch with 2 out and no one on in the 9th inning of the last Brooklyn Dodgers game ever played. It was Sunday, September 29, 1957. This happened to be the last at-bat of Kennedy's 16-year playing career. He was released by the Dodgers on October 15th. Bob Kennedy's son Terry was drafted in the first round by the Cardinals after an All-American season at Florida State in 1976. He was named the Sporting News College Player of the Year. Terry was a catcher and had a 14-year career with the Cardinals, Padres, Orioles, and Giants. On the bottom right, you're going to see a picture of Ted Williams and Bob Kennedy. Are Williams and Kennedy discussing a pitch of an American League hurler? No. The two big leaguers are talking about military flight tactics. These two Marine captains, Williams from the Boston Red Sox and Kennedy from the Cleveland Indians, were stationed together in Marine Training Group 20 during their early refresher work at Cherry Point, North Carolina. This photo was taken on September 9, 1952 by the Associated Press. George Shuba, card number 34. George Thomas Shuba was born on December 13, 1924 in Youngstown, Ohio. While at Holy Name School, an unboxed George's ear, causing a perforated eardrum. The injury turned out to be a blessing in disguise, he said years later. As a result, Shuba, who turned 17 shortly after the attack on Pearl Harbor, was ineligible for the draft after World War II broke out. Without it, I might be buried in Germany today, he recalled. Some would call Shuba a common, but give me a moment to try to change your mind. As a youngster, he hung a knotted string from a pipe in the basement and drilled a hole into one of his baseball bats. He filled it with lead to make it heavier. He would then swing it repeatedly at the string. He developed bat speed and once said, "I swung a 44-ounce bat 600 times a night, 4,200 times a week, 47,200 swings every winter." This routine helped prepare Shuba for the major leagues, where his ability to spray the ball to all fields with powerful line drives earned him the nickname Shotgun. In 1943, when he was 17 years old, he participated in a tryout for the Brooklyn Dodgers and eventually signed a contract. The Dodgers signed Shuba for $150 a month and another $150 if he was still in the organization by July 1st. "I would have given him $150 out of my own pocket just to show him what I could do," Shuba recalled later in an autobiography. During his minor league time in Mobile, Alabama, he gained at least one fan. Hank Aaron watched the Mobile Bears as a kid and once said, "My favorite on the team was a player named George Shotgun Shuba." Shuba made his major league debut with the Dodgers on July 2, 1948. At the peak of his playing career, Shuba delivered a pinch hit home run in the 1953 World Series opener. He was the first National League player to hit a pinch hit home run in a World Series game. Shuba's major league career ended on a high note when Brooklyn won the 1955 World Series. Shuba played his final game on September 25, 1955. He played all 7 of his big league seasons with the Brooklyn Dodgers, which included 3 World Series appearances. After retiring from Major League Baseball, Shuba returned to Ohio, where he met his future wife. The couple settled in a suburb of Youngstown, where Shuba spent 25 years working in the office of the United States Postal Inspection Service. Shuba died on September 29, 2014, at the age of 89. He was the last living Dodger who appeared in the final game of the 1955 World Series. George Shuba is often remembered for his symbolic role in breaking down Major League Baseball's color barrier. While playing for the Dodgers minor league affiliate, the Montreal Royals, Shuba congratulated his teammate Jackie Robinson with a handshake as he crossed home plate on April 18, 1946. Robinson was hitting second, with Shuba batting third that day. Robinson would hit his first home run with the Dodgers organization, a glorious 3-run homer over the left field fence. Shuba was waiting for him at home plate, where he offered his congratulatory handshake to Jackie, who had just become the first black player in modern organized baseball when he made his debut on this date. Giving congratulations to a home run hitter was a common ritual in those days. Robinson smiled as he touched home plate and was greeted by Shuba, where the moment was captured by the Associated Press. This portrait of racial tolerance was dubbed the handshake by the New York Times. George Shotgun Shuba had noticed the display of disrespect by his teammates, so Shuba walked toward home plate and did the simple thing, the right thing. You see, the 2 players that were on base when Robinson hit his home run did not provide any congratulations and did not wait for him at home plate. They simply ran to the dugout. Shuba grew up playing on racially integrated teams in Youngstown, Ohio. He simply saw Robinson as a teammate, someone of his equal who deserved respect. George Shuba once said, "What were the odds that a kid like me, playing sandlot baseball in 1943, would in 3 short years be shaking the hand of the first black player in modern times to integrate baseball. I'd say 1,000,000 to 1. The moment was described as the first interracial handshake in North American baseball's recent history. On December 3, 2019, it was announced that a 7-foot statue of the handshake would be placed in Shuba's hometown of Youngstown, Ohio. The statue, entitled A Handshake for the Century, was unveiled on April 18, 2021, on the 75th anniversary of the gesture. George Shuba rarely wore his 1955 World Series ring. He was not a very sentimental man, but there was one exception, his son Mike Shuba told the New York Times writer David Anderson. A picture framed and hanging above his favorite chair in the living room. It's the photo of him with Jackie Robinson in Jersey City, Mike Shuba said. It's been there for 40 years. On September 18, 2007, Youngstown's Bortz Ball Field, a recreational spot that Shuba often played as a child, was renamed as the George Shotgun Shuba Field at Bortz Park. George Shuba did not set out to convince anyone that he was not common. He was only trying to do the right thing, but I hope I changed your mind. On the left in the middle, a colored picture of George Shuba on the left. He's also the third from the left in the bottom black and white photo with the group of Dodgers. On the right, you'll see the handshake taken by the Associated Press with Jackie Robinson crossing home plate. On the bottom, Jackie Robinson, George Shuba, Pee Wee Reese, and Roy Campanella. And on the bottom right, you'll see George Shuba giving congratulations to a young African-American young man, probably recreating the original handshake.
Susan Spencer now with the story of a home run handshake.
Jackie Robinson's first home run for the Brooklyn Dodgers Montreal minor league team was a game changer. What happened next was astonishing.
This has been called the handshake of the century, which sounds a little dramatic. Do you think that's overstating it?
Well, we've had other important handshakes internationally and here at home, but this was a harbinger of the civil rights movement to come.
Robinson, of course, would go on to be a civil rights advocate. But first came that handshake. It was April 18th, 1946, his debut as the only black man to play in an all-white league.
They wanted him to fail.
So no surprise, says baseball fan Mark Mellon, that the other players didn't even acknowledge Robinson's first homer. All save the next batter up, George Shotgun Shuba.
If you look at the photographs, you can see the pure joy of the moment. He didn't think black, white. As George was known to say in later life, I would have shaken his hand if he was Technicolor.
When it's finished, the bronze statue will stand in this park in Youngstown, Ohio, George Shuba's hometown.
At the time, for Shuba, this would have been something of a risk, right?
With his teammates, I would think so. He may have gotten some jaded looks in terms of, what are you doing?
Why do you think he did it? He didn't have to do that.
I think he did it because it was the right thing to do.
Herb Washington, a businessman in the Youngstown area, is a co-chair of the statue committee. It was in that atmosphere that George Shuba just did what came naturally.
People have to remember that George didn't ask to be the batter up, and he did not know Jack was going to hit a home run. He always taught me as a young kid, if you're ever put on the spot, just do the right thing and everything will work out fine.
Shuba's son Mike says that handshake photo was such a treasured keepsake, his dad displayed it in the family living room until the day he died.
This was long before the civil rights movement, before Rosa Parks. In that context, some people might think a very brave thing to do.
I agree with you, yes. Other members of the team, some players didn't even want to bat after Jackie. There were other players, too, that refused to be teammates with Jack. It's sad to see that, but George and Jack became friends, and they showed America that America was maturing.
What do you hope this statue says to say the father with his kid who walks into the park 2 years from now and looks up and sees it?
I hope the father is able to explain to the kid what the statue represents and how in that child's lifetime, hopefully racism and bigotry won't exist.
Everything about it is uplifting. There is the dark backstory of why is this so significant? But it's America emerging from the war, from a time of segregation, with a realization that we can be better.
A realization as simple as reaching out a hand.
Irv Noren, card number 35. Irving Arnold Noren was born in Jamestown, New York on November 29, 1924, but the family moved prior to his teenage years to Pasadena, California, where he graduated from high school. In high school, he was a star basketball player and was named California Interscholastic Federation Player of the Year in 1942. Noren would attend Pasadena Junior College, now Pasadena City College, starring on both the basketball and baseball teams. As a pitcher, he went 10-2 in 1942. In basketball, he set the school's single-game scoring record with 29 points. World War II broke out and his college studies were interrupted. He entered the Army in March of 1943. During basic training at Fort Ord, California, Noren injured his knee and required surgery. Noren was discharged from the Army in 1946 and returned to college. During the fall of 1946, Noren played professional basketball with the minor league Los Angeles Red Devils alongside future Major League Baseball players Jackie Robinson and George Crowe. Additionally, Noren played briefly with the Chicago American Gears of the National Basketball League in the 1946-47 season. Noren was signed by the Brooklyn Dodgers, but on September 30th, 1949, he was sold to the Washington Senators for $70,000. Noren later suggested the sale was due in part to losses suffered by the Dodgers in a professional football venture that did not work out. This was indeed the case. The organization had lost $500,000 on the Brooklyn Dodgers football team, which played for 3 seasons from 1946 to 1948 in the new All-American Football Conference, going 8-32. The league folded after the 1949 season, with Cleveland, San Francisco, and Baltimore being absorbed into the NFL. After becoming the MVP of the Texas League in 1948 and the MVP of the Pacific Coast League in 1949, Noren would get his first big league at-bat on opening day in 1950. On May 3, 1952, Noren was traded to the Yankees. Joe DiMaggio had retired and Mickey Mantle was slow to recover from off-season knee surgery. In the second game of the 1955 season at Boston, Noren, running from second, was gunned down trying to score the tying run. Noren did not agree with the call, bumped umpire Bill McKinley, and was thrown out of the game. When Noren's replacement, Elston Howard, entered the game, it was the first time a player of color had played for the Yankees in a regular season game. This historical introduction of Howard to Yankee fans cost Noren a fine of $100 and a 3-day suspension. Noren's last season was in 1960 when he had split the season with the Cubs and the Dodgers. Noren concluded his 11-year career with a batting average of .275 and appearances in 3 World Series and 1 All-Star game. As a player and a coach between 1950 and 1975, Noren was a member of the 5 World Championship teams. He was the last surviving member of the 1952 World Series champion New York Yankees. On May 23, 1945, he married Vida Mae Muse, who worked in the telegraph office near Fort Ord. They were married almost 68 years when she died of a heart attack on February 7, 2013. On their 60th anniversary, V said they were actually married for 30 years because Irv was on the road half the time. He died in Carlsbad, California on November 15, 2019, just 2 weeks before his 95th birthday. After his playing days were over, Noren managed the AAA Hawaii Islanders in 1962 and 1963, where he would fine players $50 if they showed up too sunburned to play baseball. I wonder if a manager could do that now. In 1971, Oakland A's manager Dick Williams, who had also attended Pasadena High School, hired Noren to coach third base. He would win 2 World Series championships, 1972 and 1973. Williams would re-sign after the 1973 season, and Noren would stay on for new manager Alvin Dark. Dark and Noren clashed, and he was let go in July of 1974. Noren remembered the A's fighting in the clubhouse, but being all business once they were on the field, although there were occasional brawls with the opposition. At age 48, Noren was not excluded from the fisticuffs. On August 22, 1972, the A's were playing the Detroit Tigers. A brawl broke out in the 7th inning, and Noren's eye was cut open when he was blindsided by Detroit's Tom Timmerman. In 1985, Noren was honored in his hometown of Jamestown, New York, where he was inducted into the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame. He received the Legends Award from the Pasadena Sports Hall of Fame in 2010 and was honored with the Distinguished Alumni Award and Pasadena City College. Noren used his World Series winnings from 1956 to invest in a bowling alley in Pasadena in 1957, attracting stars from across the sporting world. He also owned a liquor store in Arcadia, California, and 2 sporting goods stores in Pasadena. According to the New York Times, Noren bred thoroughbred horses in Southern California, in addition to his other businesses. One fun note, when the Islanders began playing in 1962, its games were televised in Hawaii. Harry Kalas, future Hall of Fame broadcaster for the Phillies, was in Hawaii on military service and got his first announcing job with the team. In the first televised game, he was hurried onto the field to conduct a pregame interview with Noren. I began my interview. It's only fitting that the first game to be played in Hawaii is on television. Irv, how do you think the team will do this year? Kalas recalled in 1977. Noren looked at me and said, Harry, we have a lousy club, and we'll be lucky if we win 20 games this year. My heart went up into my throat, and I thought my career was over before it got started, Kalas said. None of that made it onto the air, of course. It was an elaborate setup, and Noren welcomed the new broadcaster into baseball with a classic prank. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by and learning a little bit more about the men who graced the 1953 set with me. Special thanks goes to Mike Lewis for his continued support and his help in research for this episode.